HILDA, returning each year to see how their lives have changed. It's the survey that's tracked more than 17,000 people from the same 9,000 households for 20 years. And HILDA has some news. First up, marriage. Fewer of us are doing it. The proportion of Aussies tying the knot dropping about 6% over the last 20 years, mirrored by a growth in de facto relationships which have gone up by more than 5%.
Honestly, I don't see the point of it.
I think people just think it's a piece of paper.
Weddings are not cheap.
It's up to you. You don't need to have an expensive wedding.
But while de facto couples are becoming more common, they're also more likely to separate.
With de facto relationships, we've often got a situation of try before you buy.
HILDA also found the share of 18 to 29-year-olds still living at home has surged, now at record levels. Men not only more likely to stay in the family nest, but more likely to return if they leave. To blame? The cost of housing, spending more time in education, and pastime pursuits. Young people are also the most lonely. Almost half of 15 to 24-year-olds are psychologically distressed, more than double 20 years ago. The rise coinciding with the arrival and prevalence of social media.
This is things like being depressed, feeling worthless, feeling hopeless, these sorts of things. So it's a very, I think, serious social issue.
But there was positive change too. The gender pay gap is narrowing at its fastest rate in 20 years. Women are now earning 86 cents for every dollar taken home by a man. Behind this glimmer of hope, men have spent more time looking after the kids and doing housework. But women still spend 75% more time on chores and childcare than their male partners.
Certainly there's a government commitment to improving the economic fortunes of women, so I think there's reason to be optimistic.
Women not only doing most of the housework, they're also more likely to work when they're unwell too.
I hardly took sick days.
I get man flu, so I'm definitely not going into the office.
Oh, I definitely take them. Because I can.
HILDA also kindly revealed that Aussies are smoking less but taking more drugs and still into binge drinking. And that's a wrap on this year's HILDA report. HILDA, you've been great. See you next year.
I'll tell you what, a lot has changed in the last 20 years. Let me take you back to 2001 when petrol was 91 cents a litre, if you can believe it. The cost of a pot of beer, $2.60. The average cost of a home in Sydney, are you ready? $312,000.
Wow.
Yep. And this was the top song in the charts. It was a better time.
Yeah.
It was a better time.
That's a banger.
That is a banger.
Well, I think everyone says it was a better time if you think back. But 21 years ago, I mean, the things that were great about it, people could afford to buy a house, which you mentioned. There was no electric cars, which was fantastic. And you used your mobile phone to ring people up.
Yeah.
Right.
Not sit there death scrolling all day long.
The social
Stupid on the bus looking at your phone. What?
It's called doom scrolling.
Oh, that's it. Death scrolling.
Death scrolling,
Yeah,
I think that's
pretty
very
much.
different.
It's that social media loneliness bit is actually a really interesting part of it because that's the biggest differential. Like we said in that story, it's doubled loneliness in young people. Nothing else has doubled. I mean, maybe house prices.
So what do we put that down to? Disconnection because of social
we're more
media?
connected than ever, and we're so disconnected at the same time.
It's because the nature of the connection matters.
Yeah.
Like I think for a while we sort of bought this idea that any connection was, they were all equivalent. A connection online is the same as a connection in person. You can't feel lonely if you're surrounded by people, but you can if you're surrounded by avatars. And it's just like, what?
Well,
Okay?
well, it's like that is quite deep because I thought it was because a pot of beer was so cheap that you could afford to go to the pub and then you'd meet people at the pub.
That's
a
very
good
true.
explanation.
Yeah, that's kind of
That's true.
Thank you.
What
Brian.
job did you have 20 years ago?
I was, I was just at school, just hanging out.
11?
Yeah, I was 11. I was.
You were
doing all right.
11?
Yeah, what's wrong with that? That's fine.
Why do you reckon we're turning our back on marriage more?
Well,
Not just you and I.
I
Like a very personal
I
question.
could give you several million reasons, but I'm not.
But, yeah.
Are we leaving it there? Anyway,
There's no way-
happy
you
wedding
can't take it.
anniversary, Willie.
I was ready.